Now, I thought the Albanese government, I thought it was swimming in tax money, your money, more than ever before. And I wonder, of course, the people who pay most tax, they haven't had a tax cut in years to make up for the inflation that's been pushing them into ever higher tax brackets. But this record tax take apparently is still not enough, because we're being softened up for yet another new tax or levy. And the excuse for that? To provide more aged care to an ageing population. Sounds quite noble. The Albanese government actually did go to the last election saying no to a levy for aged care, but 3 weeks ago the minister said, well, she's open to it. And she wants a review to look into a new levy, the levy that was recommended by a royal commission.
We need to have an honest, responsible and mature discussion about what aged care is going to look like in this country. And if I'm setting up a task force that is going to answer the question of how do we sustainably, equitably fund aged care in Australia moving forward, we need to deliberate on the recommendations to aged care funding that were handed by the Royal Commission.
In short, new tax could be coming. And now the trap is closing. New aged care providers now are saying older baby boomers with big superannuation balances or high value properties, they've got to pay more for aged care. Joining me is Ian Henschke, Chief Advocate for National Seniors Australia. Ian, thanks for your time. There are really two questions here, aren't there? One is, do we need to spend more on aged care? The other is, and if we do we really have to raise taxes or impose a new levy to do it? Let's start with that first one. Do we need more money for aged care?
Well, that's a very interesting point, because in the last budget, hidden away there in the budget papers, was a statement to say that $2.2 billion had been saved over the forward estimates because people were staying in their own home. So let's have a look at what's been happening, particularly since COVID. More and more Australians are staying in their own home, getting care in their home, and if you do that, on average, you probably save the government tens of thousands of dollars, probably $40,000, $50,000 in that area. So the occupancy rate of residential aged care is in fact going down as a proportion, and so we are actually spending less effectively on aged care. The other thing you've got to ask yourself, Andrew, is where is the money going at the moment? Because there are very convoluted structures that are set in place. There was an article in the paper on the weekend about one private family-run aged care company that's now set itself up in some sort of charitable context so that it doesn't have to pay tax. We know that over the last 20 years, there have been more private providers coming into aged care and fewer what we'd call faith-based providers or charitable providers. So when we hear this argument continually that there's simply not enough money in aged care, it makes me wonder why the increase has happened. I think about 20% more private providers have gone into aged care. There must be some money in there somewhere.
And obviously they're doing it for a buck, not out of the goodness of their heart. But look, in broad, I mean, clearly we're an ageing population, and I guess in time, yes, I can understand that more money would be needed for aged care as more people get older and look for aged care possibilities. Accepting what you just said, but, just in broad. Even if that were all true, do we really need a new tax or a levy or extra charges, particularly charges on baby boomers, to get that money into the system?
Well, I'm not sure. And look, what I think is important to remember is that when we survey people at National Seniors, they all say that the number one thing they want to do is stay in their own home. And I go back to what I began with, Andrew. It's not possible for everyone to do that, but we're seeing a big shift towards that. And we also know that many older Australians, if they're given some form of support to stay in their own home, are going to have less cause, for example, to have family members come and do that work, which frees them up to do work as well. So it's a very integrated sort of structure. But I think that we do actually have to have a look at what is going on. If you talk to the providers in aged care, they say that we spend less per percentage of GDP on aged care than a comparable country. I think we've got to look at those figures and make sure that they're accurate. We hear the aged care providers saying that they need more money, and yet during the Royal Commission, there was an independent assessment done by a group called BDO, and they found that there were very complex structures that had been set up by aged care companies, and not just the for-profits, but also the not-for-profits as well, in effect shielding the vision that we should have to look into those books. So I think we need to have transparency in aged care to know where the money's going at the moment and how much of it is being spent on care before we make that next step of saying, all right, we need to pay more. But if you ask older Australians, they will say quite clearly that they are prepared to pay more for better care. They just want to know that that money's not going to a Lamborghini or to a mansion somewhere for the provider. Or in some cases,
Ian, I actually
to prop
happen
up
to
other
know
sections
or
of
have
it.
read of. Yeah, that's a good point. I know or happen to have read of a number of people who have become millionaires, multimillionaires out of aged care. So there must be some money there. Ian Henschke, thank you so much indeed for your time. You've always been a great advocate for that sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And I do hope that the government looks carefully as to where the money goes before they put a new tax on anything.